Horror movies are full of scary scenes. That's sort of why they exist. But every once in a while, a scene goes beyond scary. You know the ones. They're so shocking, so inventive, they don't just freak you out, they change the way horror gets made. Hey, I'm CT, and that's what I'm getting into today. 8 terrifying scenes that completely reshape the genre. From slasher surprises to supernatural meltdowns, and even a guy fighting his own hand, these are the scenes that help to make horror what it is today. So let's kick this off with a movie that made everyone terrified of answering the phone back in the 90s, Scream. So picture this, it's 1996 and slashers are in a real slump. The genre's been milked dry by endless sequels and it's become completely predictable to the point that it's basically a parody of itself. Then along comes an OG master of horror, Wes Craven, the same guy that frightened us all with Freddy Krueger back in the 80s, and he's ready to put a whole new twist on the slasher film. And what better way to show everyone that he's back with a vengeance than by completely destroying audience expectations in the very first scene. It's no accident that Drew Barrymore's face was plastered across every piece of marketing material for this movie. She was the star, and when she answered that phone, we all thought this was her setup as the final girl. The creepy voice on the other end starts off playful.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
But things quickly get serious.
No, you listen, you little bitch. If you hang up on me again, I'll gut you like a fish.
And within 10 minutes, she's gutted and hanging from a tree. Scream's opening scene would be an incredible horror short on its own, but it was just the beginning of this new, more meta take on the slasher genre. That knife going into Drew Barrymore's chest shocked audiences, and horror veterans just saw the rules they thought they knew get thrown right out the window. This scene wasn't just shocking, it was smart too. The phone call blends dark humor with genuine menace, and the kill itself is truly brutal. The icing on the cake is the parents arriving just in time to see the results of Ghostface's attack. Scream has devolved into a franchise looking for excuses to bring back the dead, but I think they do well to take some pointers from this first one. Seriously, imagine if they killed Neve Campbell off in the first 10 minutes of Scream 7. Now that would be a Scream movie. But I digress. My next movie on this list is another one that wasn't afraid to kill off a big star in unceremonious fashion, but that's not the scene I'm talking about today, because Ridley Scott's Alien has one of the most horrifying dinner table scenes ever put to screen, with a killer creature that works from the inside out. 1979's Alien is the movie that showed audiences just how terrifying space really is. H.R. Geiger's Xenomorph set a new standard for alien designs, redefining what an alien creature could be and how it could kill you. On top of that, the film's pacing makes you feel like any one of this crew could meet their maker at any moment, and it's the birth of the Xenomorph at the crew's dinner table that etched Alien into the annals of horror history, shocking both audiences and cast members alike. Kane seems to be recovering from his close encounter with a facehugger. No one's quite sure why it released him from its death grip, but they're all glad to have him back in time for dinner. Things start off normally enough, and that's when this scene goes from jovial to concerning. Next thing you know, Kane's on his back, seizing, and that chestburster is ripping through his rib cage in a geyser of blood, birthing one of the most infamous monsters in cinema. The mini Xeno gives its future victims a once-over before scurrying away to grow to man-sized proportions. What makes this scene so brilliant is how completely unexpected it was. Not even the actors knew how insane this scene was gonna get, so their looks of shock and disgust are completely genuine. It was the moment that put sci-fi horror on the map, inspiring decades of space-based horror movies like Event Horizon and Pandorum, but personally, nothing has ever topped the original Chestburster for me. Now, if Alien turned the body into the ultimate horror set piece, this next film went even deeper into the soul itself. Because nothing says nightmare fuel like a little girl possessed by the devil. Yeah, I'm talking about The Exorcist. Released in 1973, The Exorcist's influence went beyond horror. It was a cultural phenomenon. There were lines wrapped around the block, people fainting in theaters, and church groups protesting outside.
Roman Catholics especially.
This movie had the sort of hype marketing can't buy. When audiences finally sat down, they were treated to things that no mainstream movie had ever dared show before. Regan goes from an innocent child to a snarling demon-possessed nightmare, and those infamous bedroom scenes, they still live rent-free in my head. Projectile pea soup vomit, the spinning head, the guttural demonic voice saying the most horrible things ever.
Your mother sucks cocks in hell, Paris.
Let's just say I was a little too young the first time I saw this one, and some things can never be unseen. And it wasn't just me either. This movie straight up traumatized moviegoers at the time. They weren't ready for this sort of stuff.
It just scared me to death. Things just like this really scared me to death. I think it's disgusting.
Why?
I can't even describe it. It's so horrible. And I was just ready to pass out.
Yeah.
I passed out in about the first half hour, yeah.
Yeah, those are actual audience member interviews from a 1973 newscast. Like I said, you can't buy marketing like that. And in a lot of ways, The Exorcist not only redefined horror, it actually legitimized the genre. The Oscars came calling, and critics had to start taking horror seriously. Plus, it spawned a wave of religious horror that's still going strong with franchises like The Omen and The Conjuring, or basically any other movie where a priest is yelling at a demon. They can all trace their existence right back to Regan's bedroom. And half a century later, people will still tell you that's the scariest movie I've ever seen. But while The Exorcist terrified audiences with deadly seriousness, our next film took the exact opposite approach. Chainsaws, slapstick, and a man wrestling with his own possessed hand. Welcome to Evil Dead 2. Released in 1987, Evil Dead 2 is part sequel, part remake, and totally awesome. Sam Raimi pretty much took everything wild about the Evil Dead and cranked it up even further. The scene that really sums up this whole movie is Ash versus his own hand. The setup here is wild enough, with Ash's dead and decapitated girlfriend coming back to life to attack him, which also introduces the chainsaw into the mix, which will be very important. Anyway, Ash defeats this deadite girlfriend, but he's been bitten, turning his hand evil. What follows is a truly bonkers sequence and one of the best examples of physical comedy done right this side of Buster Keaton. This hand has completely betrayed him. It's smashing plates over his head, punching him, dragging him across the floor. So, faced with this hand betrayal, Ash is left with only one choice. He's got to chainsaw off his own hand. Cue the geyser of blood. This scene proved that horror doesn't have to choose between funny or scary, because this film perfected walking that tightrope of being both at the same time, with Bruce Campbell leading the way as a true horror hero with a chainsaw for one hand and a boomstick in the other.
Groovy.
Without Evil Dead 2, there's no Shaun of the Dead or Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Evil Dead 2 also fully cemented Cabin in the Woods movies as their own subgenre, the whole thing finally coming full circle in 2011 with the release of the horror comedy literally titled Cabin in the Woods. Ash's biggest problem was his own hand, but the survivors of our next film, their problem was pretty much everyone else, because George Romero's Dawn of the Dead isn't just about zombies, it's about what happens when society eats itself alive. By 1978, George Romero had already invented the modern zombie film with Night of the Living Dead, so with Dawn of the Dead, he wasn't interested in just showing us more zombies, he wanted to show us the world they left behind. And he kicks this one off with one of the bleakest and most disturbing opening sequences in horror. 5 minutes in, and we're in a housing project under siege. Police storm the building, doors splinter, gunfire erupts, and one cop's on his own racist rampage, blasting away tenants with casual cruelty. It's crazy, it's chaotic, and George Romero makes sure that you can't look away. And just when you think the human violence is bad enough, he reminds us this is a zombie movie after all, and the dead begin to rise. Families who had hidden their loved ones are suddenly facing the nightmare of a hallway cramped with flying bullets and flesh-eating creatures. And then there's that moment. A woman runs into the arms of someone she trusts, only for him to sink his teeth deep into her shoulder. It may look a little dated now, but it's one of the early gore effects from the godfather of gore himself, Tom Savini. The apartment raid works because Romero stacks horrors on top of each other. Police brutality, families torn apart, the undead lurching back to life to consume the living. It's relentless, it's grim, and that's the real genius of Dawn of the Dead. The movie begins with humans tearing each other apart, and it ends the same way. These protagonists manage the zombie threat well enough while holed up in the mall, but when the biker gang storms in, well, that's the end of their fragile little paradise. Romero's message is clear here. It's not the dead you need to fear the most, it's the living, especially the ones that never hit the like button. George Romero may have invented the modern zombie movie, but across the ocean, Mario Bava was busy laying the blueprint for another genre entirely. With A Bay of Blood, he gave birth to the slasher as we know it. Known in some markets as Twitch of the Death Nerve, which might actually be an even better title than A Bay of Blood, this movie from 1971 is basically a giallo on steroids. So that means on top of the classic Italian dubbed audio track that makes every conversation feel just a little bit out of sync,
Good Lord, Simon, you make me feel like a murderer.
there's greed, betrayal, and a whole lot of stabbing. And it's all set around a quiet bay. And what this film lacks in story, it makes up for with a whole lot of kills. And I do mean a whole lot. This movie has a higher body count than the first 2 Halloween movies or the first 4 Friday the 13th movies, all in a runtime under 90 minutes. And not all the victims even matter to this story. There's 4 random youths who show up halfway through the film, and it's pretty clear they're just there to pad out the runtime and the body count. It doesn't really matter who they are, but they do get some of the film's most memorable deaths, so hey, that's something, right? And the crown jewel here is the double impalement death scene, when a couple sneaks away for a little bit of the beast with 2 backs, only to get skewered together mid-coitus by a spear driven right through both their bodies. It's shocking, it's mean, and it might look exactly like a scene you're already familiar with. That's because Friday the 13th Part 2 didn't just borrow this idea, it ripped the scene off wholesale. It's tough to even call a ripoff like that an homage, but it does show how truly influential A Bay of Blood really was. And Mario Bava may not have known it at the time, but with this movie he created the first draft of the slasher rulebook. An isolated setting, creative kills, and a constantly growing body count. Everything from Friday the 13th to In a Violent Nature owes something to the groundwork laid right here. So if A Bay of Blood laid the groundwork for the slasher boom, our next film did the same thing for found footage. It wasn't the first to use the style, but thanks to one of the most brilliant marketing campaigns in horror history, it was the first to convince audiences that this might actually be real. Let's talk about the Blair Witch Project. When the Blair Witch Project was released in 1999, it wasn't the first found footage horror movie ever made, but it may have been the first to so thoroughly convince audiences that what they were watching might actually be real. The marketing for this movie was pure brilliance. There were missing persons posters, faked websites, even a phony documentary that aired on the Sci-Fi Channel. All of this blurred the lines between fact and fiction so thoroughly that people actually showed up to theaters unsure if they were watching a movie or evidence of some heinous crime. Blair Witch doesn't need a massive body count or gallons of blood to bring the scares either. There's no elaborate kills here, just 3 kids in the woods with a couple of cameras and a creeping sense of dread that's sure to get under your skin. Watching this in theaters in 1999 is an experience that can never be replicated. But it is a movie that's still best watched in a pitch black room because it thrives on what you can't see. The sinister noises at night, the stick creations hanging about the forest, and those creepy as hell stone piles all force your imagination to fill in the blanks of what might be in these woods. And everything in this movie builds up to the final scene and the final shot. And Heather is screaming hysterically, searching for Mike in this weird house, and the last thing you see is him standing alone in the corner of the basement when suddenly the camera is dropped to the ground and everything goes black. And that's what made this movie so scary. It doesn't show you the witch. It doesn't show you what happens to these documentarians. It leaves it all up to your imagination. And this movie was lightning in a bottle, a low-budget indie that hit at exactly the right time with marketing unlike anything the public had ever seen. This was the movie that put found footage on the map and paved the way for the VHS franchise and movies like As Above, So Below. But while the Blair Witch Project ignited the found footage phenomenon, it didn't spark a revival of folk horror. At least not right away. That wouldn't come until years later when Robert Eggers gave us The Witch, a film that dragged us back into the woods for a much different kind of nightmare. 2015's The Witch is a slow-motion descent into paranoia, ending in the most ominous proposition ever uttered by a farm animal. This film follows a devout Puritan family that's been cast out of their community for being too conservative. Now they're forced to live beyond the edge of society on a seemingly cursed homestead bordering on a creepy forest. The crops fail, their baby vanishes, and this family starts to suspect that there's a witch amongst them. Every member of the family unravels in their own way. The father clings to his pride, mom's drowning herself in grief, and the young ones are running around singing weird songs about their pet goat. But at the center of all this is Thomasin, played by Anya Taylor-Joy in her breakout role, and she eventually becomes the target of this family's suspicions, and despite doing nothing wrong, she's accused of consorting with the devil. Robert Eggers left no detail unattended when building out this strange world of 17th century New England Puritanism, and the constant sense that something evil is lurking in that forest really brings the dread. Because this movie's not about jump scares, it's all about setting a mood and this sense of dread that culminates in some visceral violence, leaving Thomasin alone after the destruction of her family. But she's not really alone. There's still Black Phillip, the family's goat, who it turns out is something much darker. And he poses a question that's as seductive as it is sinister.
Wouldst thou like to live deliciously?
By keeping Black Phillip's true form in the shadows, Eggers lets our imaginations do the heavy lifting as to what sort of devil or demon this must be. And it's always left me wondering if Thomasin ever really had much of a choice in the matter, or if this was Black Phillip's dark plan the entire time. The Witch, it's quiet, intimate, and terrifying. It's the movie that reignited folk horror after decades in the dark, too. Films like Midsummer, The Ritual, all owe a debt to Eggers for proving just how unnerving an old folk tale can be. So there you have it, 8 terrifying scenes that reshaped horror forever. And of course, I only had time to cover 8 scenes today, but horror is such a deep, twisted genre. There are literally scores of other scenes that could have made the cut, and you know what? That's what makes horror so fun. So, I want to hear from you too. What's the scariest moment that you think deserves to be on this list? What is it that traumatizes you and keeps you up at night? Is it the gory stuff? Is it the slow psychological mind benders? Or maybe something else entirely? I want to hear about it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be checking them out, and who knows, maybe they'll make it into a future video. I'm just getting started with this channel, so if you had a fun time reliving some of horror's most terrifying moments with me, make sure you hit those like and subscribe buttons so you don't miss the next one. And that's it for this list. I'm CT Reese. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and keep watching weird movies. I know I will.